The Jets dress up for Halloween as an honest-to-goodness professional football team and give us a very familiar feeling in a win against the Houston Texans. Let's break it down today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Friday, November 1st, 2024, and I'm your host, John B. from GanggreenNation.com. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We have new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. If you're new to the show, welcome. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Well, we have an honest-to-goodness win to talk about today. The Jets beat the Houston Texans 21-13 last night at MetLife Stadium on Thursday Night Football. Jets have 3 wins this season. 2 of them have come on Thursday Night Football. I mean, as much as most of us don't like these Thursday night games, maybe we should petition the league to have the Jets play exclusively on Thursday, because that seems to be where the Jets play their best football. And this is I think this is fair to say, this is the first quality win of the season the Jets had. The other 2 wins, one was against the Tennessee team that's just dreadful. If the season ended today, Tennessee would have the second overall pick. And the other win was against a New England team that's dreadful, and a New England team that only has 2 wins, one of which came against the Jets last week. The Jets went out there and beat a team that's probably going to the playoffs, a team that is in the lead of the AFC South, and beat them pretty handily. And I think this game shows you how quickly things can turn around in the NFL, because the Jets played a miserable first half, if we're going to be honest. And at halftime, I am so angry. I'm sitting there like I'm planning like these very provocative titles for this podcast episode because I'm so angry. I'm like getting ready to rip the Jets into shreds. And then they go out and dominate the second half. And it's almost like we'd seen this before. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had seen something like this recently. And the reality is we have seen this recently. This very much mirrored what happened a year ago when the Jets played the Houston Texans. And the Texans, of course, are one of the top teams in the AFC. They won the South last year. They probably will win the South again this year. I mean, maybe, who knows? Maybe the Jets will send their season spiraling into a free fall. But last year, the Jets and Texans played. It was later in the year. Of course, this game was on Halloween night. Last year, they played December 10th, so deeper into the season. But it was a very similar season to the Jets. Jets entered with very high expectations, of course, and did not come close to meeting them. Of course, last year they did not have Aaron Rodgers. This year they do. And the first half was ugly last year. The teams entered the locker room with a scoreless tie. This year, Houston led 7-0. And the Jets, it wasn't just that the Jets were playing a bad game. It's just there was such a lack of professionalism with the way the Jets played the first half. And the most glaring example of that was the Malachi Corley play, where the Jets essentially blocked a walk-in touchdown for him. You know, I don't even want to you can't even give him credit, because the play was so well blocked that pretty much anybody's going to score on that, except Malachi Corley, who drops the ball at the 1-yard line in a premature celebration. And the excuses are out. Well, he made a play. Well, look at the blocking again. That was blocked really well. I mean, I think most receivers would score on that. And then people say he's a rookie. Last I checked, that's not an acceptable play in college football. If you make that play in college football, your coach is going to be furious. So that being a rookie is not an excuse. But you saw this all over the place. You saw one of the things that really bothered me was like Solomon Thomas got pancaked on a play. CJ Stroud kind of ran into him, and so Thomas got a sack when he was on the ground. He starts dancing around. It was just really frustrating first half, and then just a real lack of execution. There were a couple miscues between Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams. Rodgers missed Adams' his first pass of the night on what should have been a touchdown. Adams, and he miscommunicated on a play where Adams was blocking. Rodgers had changed the play. He was improvising. Adams dropped a big play late in the first half. Rodgers missed Mike Williams down on a red line route down the sideline at one point in the first half. Lots of miscues for the Jets. Lots of sloppy play. Typical of what we've seen from the Jets all season long. Not that dissimilar to what we saw a year ago when the Jets played Houston in December. And then the second half came, and it was like a different team. It's not just a different team from what we saw in the first half. It's a different team from what we've seen from most of the season. The Jets were sparked by Garrett Wilson, who had a pair of just fantastic touchdown catches, neither of which I think was on a particularly well-thrown ball by Aaron Rodgers. But Garrett made the necessary adjustments, including the second touchdown, which was maybe the play of the year in the NFL. I mean, that was when I saw that. it reminded me of the Odell Beckham Jr. touchdown and the Amazon guy showed it after that. It was, he reached up with his one arm and grabbed the ball. It's just a fantastic catch. And it wasn't really clear whether he was landed in bounds. And I'm still not convinced he landed in bounds, but you make a catch that great, you kind of deserve the touchdown because it was so amazing. It was such an amazing play to watch. The rest of the Jets team just played fantastic football in the second half. Devontae Adams finally got going. On a critical fourth down play, absolutely smokes the guy in press coverage at the line of scrimmage, and then adds a touchdown for insurance in the fourth quarter. And this Jets defense finally looks like the Jets defense. This was what we were looking for. 33 pressures, Quinnen Williams dominating. Jets finally turning up the heat on the defensive line, getting after CJ Stroud, much like they did a year ago. Now, there are going to be all sorts of questions. Does this turn the Jets season around? We're going to talk in more detail about that later on this episode. But I'm going to tell you something that I think is very similar to what I said after the game against Houston last year. Because after the game against Houston last year, people were asking, are the Jets going to go on a run now? And it was too late in the season. There's still some time for the Jets to turn it around. I mean, the Jets are going to have to play at a really high standard the rest of the way to turn this into a successful season. Last year it was too late. So there is a little bit more hope this time around. The thing is, though, these wins are such a precious commodity in the NFL. There's only 17 games in a season. And especially when it looks like you're having a lost season, you don't get many moments of joy. And I think last night's game was a genuine moment of joy for the Jets. In a way that we haven't seen a moment of joy like that since their last win, which was all the way back in September when they beat the Patriots on Thursday Night Football. Most NFL seasons have peaks and valleys. And unfortunately for the Jets, over the last 14 years, we've seen a lot more valleys than we've seen peaks. So you just have to enjoy the good moments, because for the next 10 days, the Jets are on a one-game winning streak. For the next 10 days, we get to bask in this victory. For the next 10 days, we don't have to think about an inexplicable loss. We don't have to think about the team playing poorly. We can just enjoy the fact that our football team actually put together a good game. And it came at a very unexpected point. I mean, I don't think there were many Jets fans who were particularly confident going into this game. If you saw that game, if you were watching that game in the first half, I think you're lying to me if you told me that you were confident in the way this team would respond in the second half. This team has not responded to adversity well all season long. It's been one disappointment after another. And for maybe the first time all year, the Jets got themselves off the mat and played a great second half on both sides of the football. This was really a stellar performance. Very similar to what we saw a year ago against Houston. And on some level, of course it matters what the Jets do from here. One of the things I say frequently is, a win is only good if you continue to build on it. But that's an issue for another day. That's something we can worry about a week, 2 weeks from now. Sometimes, especially in seasons like this, when the rare good moments come around, you just have to appreciate them. You have to enjoy them, because this was the Jets team I think Woody Johnson envisioned when he made all of these moves that have gotten us to the place that we're in. And, it's the type of thing that at least, maybe it helps you dream that if the Jets can play that, and I know a lot of this is trying to talk ourselves into it, but if the Jets can play like that more frequently, we'll at least see better football over the final 8 weeks of the season. Now, head here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we're going to get to some of the heroes of this game. I know everybody's really focused on Garrett Wilson, and rightly so. It was a fantastic performance by Garrett, but there was actually one player I thought who stood above Garrett. And I thought this was a guy who single-handedly kept the Jets in the game during a rough first half. I'll tell you who that guy is and why I think he's the real game MVP as we continue here on this Friday edition of Locked On Jets. This episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the best place to go to get tickets for the events you want to go to. And Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Hey, Jets fans, are you back in now? Do you want to go see the team again? Game Time's the place to get in on the action. Even a couple hours before the game, you just pull out your phone or mobile device. Game Time will have great deals for you. I've used Game Time myself on a number of occasions. Each time I've been pleasantly surprised by the quality of the tickets I've gotten and the price. I mean, you can't beat these deals. And they also show you the view from your seat, which is my favorite thing, because sometimes you show up at an event and it's not what you're expecting. You get to see a picture of what it's going to look like from your seat when you arrive, so no surprises. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL, one word with no space, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is also brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Our friends over at 5 Hour Energy know that being a passionate football fan is not just a hobby, it's a way of life. It takes a lot of energy to power through all-day tailgates, touchdown celebrations, or agonizing overtimes. You know what gave me a bit of energy, Jets fans? This game where the Jets actually showed up in the second half. Jets played 30 minutes of really good football after a five-week stretch where they played nothing but dismal football, and a first half where they didn't show up at all. Maybe the Jets had some 5 Hour Energy at halftime. Maybe that's what got them going. That's just my speculation. But 5 Hour Energy knows that no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. Whether you're prepping for the big tailgate or ironing your jersey, your game day to-do list is always a mile long. That's why the limited edition Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy shot is here to help keep you fueled throughout the season. What's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with a 5 Hour Energy. Available on 5hourenergy.com. Shipped nationwide. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first watch, your first listen every day. Big shout out to you every day. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. New episodes through the week, Monday through Friday, 5 days a week. Jets, we have a victory to break down today. It feels really nice to be able to do one of these game recaps and not be angry about the way the Jets played. I'm a little annoyed with the way they played in the first half, but you know what? They made it up to me in the second half, so I think we're good. I think a lot of people are going to make Garrett Wilson their MVP of this game, and rightly so. It was a phenomenal performance by Garrett, who maybe that Pittsburgh game motivated him a couple weeks back, because ever since then he has been phenomenal. He's playing some of the best football of his career right now, including that insane catch. I call it the catch of the year. Maybe it's the catch of the decade. You can't overtalk. You can't overrate how good that catch was. It was fantastic. But you know who I thought the real MVP of this game was for the Jets? It was Quinnen Williams. And he filled up the stat sheet in this game. He had a sack and a half. He had 2 tackles for loss, 4 quarterback hits. And by the way, they did not give him the forced fumble he had on C.J. Stroud in the first half. They awarded that to Michael Clemens when it was Quinnen Williams. So it really should be 2.5 sacks, a forced fumble, 3. I don't know if a forced fumble counts as a tackle for a loss, but maybe 3 tackles for a loss, 4 quarterback hits. It was a phenomenal performance by Quinnen Williams, and it was significant for a couple of reasons. I think in the short term, it was significant because I think, and I very rarely say this about a football player, because in football, you've got 22 guys who are on the field. You have your 11 defensive guys, your 11 offensive guys. It's very rare for one player to single-handedly make a big difference, but I think the only reason the Jets are in this game at halftime is Quinnen Williams, because whenever the Texans were moving the ball in the first half, whenever they were getting in scoring range, Quinnen Williams made a play to end the drive. And the forced fumble that they gave to Michael Clemens is an example. Quinnen Williams played a phenomenal football game, and he continued it in the second half. But that first half play was really important because the way the Jets were playing, the way the Jets were not responding to the challenge, they very easily could have been blown out, if not for a couple of plays. And it felt like to me like every single time those plays happened that kept the Jets in it, it was Quinnen Williams making it. Bigger picture, Quinnen Williams, when he plays like this, changes the defense. And you've been seeing him slowly start to rise to the occasion after a really slow start to the season. And again, maybe I needed to criticize him earlier, because the first couple of weeks of the season, he was off to a bad start. And I just kept saying, he'll be fine. He'll be fine. And then I finally started to sound the alarm a few weeks ago, and that's when he started to pick up his play. He started to see it a little bit in the first half against Pittsburgh. Last week against New England, he dominated. And then this week was his best game of the season. Quinnen Williams lifts up the defense. Look, it's not an accident that the Jets had 33 pressures in this game with Quinnen Williams playing like that, because when Quinnen Williams dominates, he makes everybody around him better. He lifts everybody up who's playing with him on that defensive line. And I think part of the reason the Jets have struggled on the defensive line so much this year, you could talk about the guys that they lost in the offseason, and I think that there is something to that. I think they did allow some key players to walk out the door. But the biggest issue with the Jets was their best player on defense was not playing like their best player. Quinnen Williams playing like that, he's one of the few players in the NFL who can transform a defense by playing at a super high level. And he's starting to do it. And if we're going to talk about the Jets turning the season around, and again, I think there's still a lot of work to be done. I think it's a really steep hill to climb. But if we're going to talk about that, if that's going to be a possibility, Quinnen Williams playing like this is a non-negotiable. because Quinnen Williams can turn your defense from okay into very good. You can turn the defense from very good into elite. And there aren't many players who can do that. I'm not sure the Jets have another player who can do it. Another guy I just want to give a shout out to on the defensive line, Will McDonald, who's playing incredible football. 9 pressures in this game. Got held a couple times. Did not record a sack, but he totally makes a difference. I mean, look, McDonald is not, he's probably never going to be a great run defender. He's probably going to be a liability in that. But you know what? In today's NFL, you get a guy to get after the quarterback. And, all of those criticisms that the Jets got for drafting McDonald a year ago, it feel like a longer than a year ago. It feels like a very long time. Of course, Garrett Wilson, I mentioned him, but let's mention him again. I mean, what a performance by Garrett Wilson. And I want to phrase this carefully, but it almost felt like early in the game, Aaron Rodgers was trying to force feed the ball to Davante Adams. Of course, Adams made a big play in the second half, and he had to leave for a short stretch because he was in. They had to examine him for a concussion. And it felt like the stretch where Adams was out, Rodgers finally, realized he should start going to Garrett Wilson more. So I don't want to say it was a good thing that like Adams went out of the game, because obviously, you never want your player to go out in a situation like that. But I do think it maybe forced Aaron Rodgers to target Garrett Wilson a little bit more. It felt like Aaron was kind of neglecting Wilson in the early stages of this game. He was just trying to force feed the ball to Davante, his guy. And what happens is you're not very efficient. And you saw the miscommunications between Rodgers and Adams. You saw the misfire with Rodgers and Adams in the first play of the game. You saw the play where Adams wasn't looking for the ball. You saw the drop. It was just off in the first half. And I feel like part of it was they were just trying to force feed the ball to Adams. Instead, in the second half, they kind of readjusted, and Garrett started getting more involved. And then, lo and behold, when you stop force feeding the ball to Adams and you start running the offense more naturally, you create opportunities for Adams. You create opportunities for Davante in the natural flow of the offense. And it's been a slow start for Davante Adams, but this was clearly his best game. 7 catches, 91 yards. Now, again, a lot of those were like in the first half when Rodgers was maybe forcing the ball to him when he shouldn't have been. But two huge plays in the second half. A critical 4th down play where Adams won at the line of scrimmage, and then the touchdown where, again, Adams won at the line of scrimmage. And we know Davante Adams is not what he used to be. Look, this is probably not going to be a 1,500-yard receiver for this team. Those days are gone. But you still see the lingering talent. He still can get off the line of scrimmage and win one-on-one. He still is going to have big games for this team. And you saw that. In this game. And they think that this was kind of the vision of the 1-2 punch the Jets thought they were cooking up when they made this trade. Another guy I want to give a shout out to on the defensive side of the ball, Jamie Sherwood, who was just everywhere you wanted him to be. Recorded 7 tackles, effective blitzing, a pair of blitzes, another quarterback hit. A guy who's really taking an opportunity and running with it. CJ Mosley really hasn't been in the lineup this year. CJ Mosley's been banged up. Feels like CJ Mosley, we talk a lot about Aaron Rodgers, can his body hold up? It feels like the same thing's going on with CJ Mosley. It seems like maybe CJ Mosley's body starting to break down a little bit. Well, Jamie Sherwood's stepping up, and Jamie Sherwood's about to be a free agent. Jamie Sherwood's making himself a lot of money with his performance. So very good performances by the Jets, especially in the second half. Jets fans should be very excited. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll turn our attention to the future. I know what I just said. I know everything I said about enjoying this win in the moment. But what does this win mean for the Jets going forward? We'll discuss that continuing here on this Friday game recap edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets in the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. And if you put money down on the Jets last night, you're looking pretty good. I mean, I was a skeptic. The Jets went into that game favored by the Houston Texans. The Jets ended up 2.5-point favorites. All the late money went to the Jets because Houston was favored through much of the week, but the Jets ended up winning. Well, if you placed a $5 bet on FanDuel on the Jets last night, you get $150 in bonus bets. So if you missed out on that, don't miss out on your next opportunity. Just go to FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. This is the Locked On Jets podcast on this Friday. We're recapping a Jets win. Feels good to say that. Our second Friday recap show with a victory. And we only had one Monday recap show after a victory this year for the Jets. So again, maybe we should try and get the Jets more on Thursday Night Football. I don't think anybody really enjoys Thursday night football that much, but it helps the Jets win, so be it. And, I do think there's an advantage to playing at home on these Thursday night games. It's a short week anyway. And if you're the road team, you really can't prepare for the game. So the schedule makers maybe did the Jets a little bit of a favor this year. Schedule makers gave the Jets a rough opening stretch. When we opened up this season, it felt like the Jets had a pretty favorable early schedule. It's proven to be anything but. They faced 5 teams that are in playoff position in the AFC so far. 5 of the 7 teams in playoff position in the AFC the Jets have played, and then Minnesota, who was off to a great start in the NFC. Schedules. I always say when the schedule release day comes in the off season, that's the most overhyped day of the year. This is a perfect example because when the schedule came out, we all said the early stretch is easy. And it turns out the early stretch was really tough, and now the schedule is starting to open up for the New York Jets. So after that win and looking at the way the rest of the schedule looks, the question: can the Jets come back? Can the Jets turn their season around? And of course, the answer to that is maybe. We never can predict the future with any certainty in the NFL. If we could, we would have had a better sense of what the schedule would look like before the season. Look, I don't want to sugarcoat the situation the Jets are in right now. They're 3-6. They are 3 games out of the last playoff spot in the loss column with 8 to play. Now, that could go down to 2 depending on the action of this weekend. So, best case scenario, you're 2 games down in the loss column from the final playoff spot with 8 to play. The schedule does start to get more favorable going forward. But I think it's fair to say this team does have a lot to clean up. The performance from the Jets last night, if we see the Jets team in the second half the rest of the way, then the Jets do have a shot to turn it around. The problem is we've seen that Jets team so infrequently. In fact, we've seen this Jets team maybe 3 times this season. We saw them for the game against New England week 3. We saw them the first 29 minutes, not even the first half, the first 29 minutes against Pittsburgh a couple weeks back. And we saw it the final 2 quarters of this game. So just under 2 games out of 9 the Jets have played, if you add it all together, the Jets have played like this. And we saw a lot of things the Jets need to clean up. And we saw there were many moments where the Jets just showed a lack of professionalism in this game. And fortunately, they turned it around. But those things can't happen going forward if the Jets are going to get on a run here. Because to get on a run, you have to play really high caliber football. You can't just turn it off and turn it on. You can turn it off and turn it on and maybe win a game here or there. That's what the Jets have been doing through much of the season. And it's gotten them to 3-6. Yes, there are wins that come along the way. And yes, again, some of the opponents the Jets will play, they'll be better than those teams. But it's going to take close to perfect football going forward from this team. So there is an awful lot to work on. I think it's one thing to say the Jets won this game. It's another to say the Jets are now on track and now we're going to the playoffs. At 3-6, it's a really tough road and you have to take it 1 week at a time. So that's why I'll close by giving you the same thing I said at the start. NFL season's long. There are peaks and valleys. In a good season, there are rough moments. And in a bad season, there are most of the time some great moments. I mean, the Jets have had some pretty lousy teams in recent years, so it hasn't always been true. But for this team, it's true. There's enough talent here to give you some really good moments, to give you some really memorable moments. And I think it's important to cherish those moments. It's because, think about what the last 5 weeks have been like for the Jets, especially the last 2 to 3 weeks, because there have been some brutal losses in this stretch. That game against Pittsburgh was a catastrophe in the second half. That game against New England was bigger than a catastrophe. And think about just how bad we all felt then. Now, at least for 9-10 days, we get to enjoy it. We don't have to have the burden of an ugly loss hanging over our heads. Look, there probably will be losses along the way. The Jets have probably dug themselves, if we're being objective, the Jets have probably dug themselves in too deep of a hole to climb out of. I know you'd like me to end the show on a different note. I know you'd probably like me to end the show on a hopeful note. But the situation is the situation. At 2-6, it's very difficult to recover. It's possible, but it's going to be very tough for this Jets team. And that means that, to find enjoyment in the season, you have to cherish wins like this. Because you get to December in the lost season, and sometimes last year, the game against Washington, the game against New England, Jets didn't win those games as much as they were just less bad than the opponent, as much as the opponent gave them the games. This was a game where the Jets went out and won. The Jets went out there and took it away from the Houston Texans. This was a really impressive performance for the Jets. And as we know, the Jets are relying on a lot of older players on the backside of their careers, guys who can't do it the way they used to. But there's always that, even for guys who are in decline, there are always a handful of moments where their talent continues to stand out, where they remind you of how great they used to be. And when those moments come for a team like the New York Jets, you have to enjoy them, because if you don't, then I don't even know why you're watching football. If you can't like sit back and watch and cherish wins like this, then I don't know how you can find any enjoyment from the sport. There are 31 teams that are not going to win the Super Bowl this year. More than half the league is not going to make the playoffs. So you just have to find the moments that bring you joy. I mean, that's part of what being an NFL fan is. And for the next week, at least, the Jets and their fans can think back on a very positive memory in a season that's had a lot of disappointments. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and like what you see, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. Enjoy the stress-free football watching you'll get on Sunday. We'll be back on Monday to talk more Jets.